Hello and welcome to our final session of the 2026 Partner Plan Act Conference. Woo! My name is Janet Vargas, and I'm the Family Engagement Strategy Coach with the Community Systems Statewide Supports Team, also known as the CS3 team at Illinois Action for Children. We're so excited to have you join us virtually for our final session and hope that over the course of this conference, you've been able to make connections with others, learn new things, and reflect on centering community well-being in the early childhood system. As we approach the final session to close the conference, we'd like to give one final shout out to our Partner Plan Act Advisory Committee who helped plan the keynote speakers and sessions. So this is a time where we want to see some reactions and some chat. One final shout out. Collaboration leaders, state partners, families, and community members across Illinois represented the diversity of our state and the communities we serve on the committee. We are so grateful for their time, their input, and guidance in bringing you this amazing conference. Thank you all. And if you want to join this committee, let us know for next year. I got to plug it in. One final thank you to our generous partners for your support in making this free conference the best that it can be. I also want to take this time to recognize our small but mighty CS3 staff. We'd work hard to bring you a conference that we hope you've enjoyed so far. I'd like to give a special shout out to Aziza Hamed, Yolanda Ortiz, and consultant Deb Huang, who each played a key role in planning and supporting this year's conference. Thank you so much. You all rock. And now I'm so excited to welcome our keynote speaker this afternoon. Dr. Dipesh Navsaria is a pediatrician working in the public interest. He blends the roles of physician, occasional children's librarian, educator, public health professional, and child health advocate. With graduate degrees in public health, children's librarianship, physician assistant studies, and medicine, he brings a unique combination of interest and experience together. So impressive. He is a professor of pediatrics at the School of Medicine and Public Health and a clinical professor of human development and family studies at the School of Human Ecology, both at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He has practiced primary care pediatrics in a variety of settings with special interest in underserved populations, and continues to practice in outpatient settings. He also works regionally and nationally with Reach Out and Read, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics. In 2022, he was appointed by the White House to the National Museum and Library Services Board. Dr. Navsaria aims to educate those who work with children and families in realizing how their professional roles, including being involved in social policy, and how they may positively benefit the cognitive and social emotional development of children, allowing them and all of us to flourish and thrive. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Navsaria. Reactions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that kind introduction and the invitation to be here today. Let's get my slides rolling here. I'll answer the question that many people have when they hear that introduction, which is that yes, I had a lot of student loan debt. So, yes. So, I'm pleased to spend some time with you today talking about early literacy. So in the medical world, we always have disclosure slides, so no relevant relationships, blah, 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 all that business. Although I always point out that I don't know if the FDA has ever approved mouthing as a use of board books. That is my son, who is now almost 24. He's very embarrassed that I show this picture, so of course I show it as often as I can. So. All right, so when I tell people that one of the things that I get to do is to tell families that they should share books together with their young children, the response that I often get is this: Oh, that's so nice. Yes, it is a nice thing. It's a wonderful thing. But I want to move us beyond this idea that it's a nice thing and really to recognize that this is actually absolutely critical when we do these sorts of things. So, on our brief voyage together today, we're going to talk about the science of the early brain, what happens when things don't go so well, what could happen when they do go well, talk about solutions, especially through literacy, and then wrap it up from there. However, one of my degrees is actually from the University, well, two of my degrees are from the University of Illinois, my medical and my library degree. So yes, I do have a degree in children's librarianship, and I think everyone, including adults, deserve a story. So I'm going to read a story out loud to you. This is a story that many of you probably know, but some of you may not. It's Where the Wild Things Are. Story and pictures by Maurice Sendak. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. His mother called him Wild Thing, so Max said, I'll eat you up. So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night, in Max's room, a forest grew and grew and grew, and grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day, and in and out of weeks, and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws, till Max said, Be still, and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once, and they were frightened, and called him the most wild thing of all, and made him king of all wild things. And now, cried Max, let the wild rumpus start. I will let you fill in the sounds of wild rumpusing in your own heads, because, I think we all rumpus a little differently. Now stop, Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely, and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around from far away across the world he smelled good things to eat, so he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so. And Max said, No. The wild things roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat, and waved goodbye, and sailed back over a year, and in and out of weeks, and through a day, and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. There's a reason that I chose this book, but we'll come to that. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about the world of the early brain. So back in 2007, the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child released a report where they tried to pull together decades and decades of research into some key points that we could say, okay, we know this is true, this is how we can guide what we're working on, what we're doing, what we implement. Even though this is now almost 20 years ago, every single one of these points has only been strengthened by the research that has come since. First, child development is a foundation for community and economic development, right? We don't usually talk about kids that way. When we talk about infrastructure, we're often talking about highways and bridges and tunnels and airports. But the reality is that we should also be talking about brain infrastructure, right? That's just as important. So we need to make sure that's not being forgotten in those conversations. Number two, brains are built over time. That means you need to continue to invest in brains even after age 1, 3, 5, 18, right? It's a life course model that we need to be thinking about in terms of learning needs. They exist throughout the lifespan. But that also means if a child did not get the right supports and say they're 11 years old, that doesn't mean that you say, oh, 11, it's too late. Oh, we can't fix it now. There's always possibility, any point in the lifespan, to start up, to do something new, to try things differently. It's a lot harder. takes a lot more resources, but it's not impossible. Okay, so nothing I say today, despite how much I go on about the early years, should be construed to think, oh, we can never do this at another age. There's a three-legged stool for developmental and health trajectories that we can think about. One is the biomedical stuff. This matters. That's why we look at it. But this alone doesn't tell us how kids are going to do over the long term. And then we realized many years ago that the socioeconomic environment mattered, that the zip code that a child is born and brought up in matters more than their genetic code. We've known that for a long time. And by the way, that zip code thing, that's a human-created phenomenon, and that means humans can fix it if we choose to. But these two things didn't tell us the whole picture. And then we recognized, who's at home? Who's in their childcare center? Who's in their neighborhood? And how are those folks connecting and engaging with those young children? And that brought us to really the third leg of the stool here. So the early brain is influenced, is the wiring of neurons is influenced by two things, genes and experiences. Okay. Now the genes program or the blueprint for how one neuron wires to another neuron. But experiences guide which neuron wires to which other neuron for what purpose. Okay. Because the early brain, we're kind of we're very different from other mammals. When we're born, we can't do a lot of things that other mammals can. Many are standing or walking or jumping around within within an hour of being born. Humans take a whole year, right, to do that. It's much slower. It's because the potential of the human brain is such that it takes a lot more time for that brain to develop. So rather than make pregnancy longer and let that brain be born at an equivalent place that it is in other mammals, really that first year of a child's life can be thought of almost like a fourth trimester of pregnancy in brain terms. Now, this is a threat as well as an opportunity because when that child is born, now the environment around them has much, much more of an influence than it did inside the uterus on the development of that brain. Now, again, genes and experiences, you need both. It's like a campfire. You need wood and you need a spark to get that flame going. Can't have one without the other. Now, we're not going to talk about genes today, not going to go on about epigenetics, but we can modify experiences. And here's where that threat and that opportunity come in. If we expose that brain to an environment where they don't get enough, they aren't getting the support they need, the resources, etc., you get a brain that wires for scarcity, for security, right? For those sorts of things. But if you give that brain what it needs, you get a brain that wires for language, for love, for learning, for literacy, right? All those things. Okay, so you say, great, that's wonderful. What's the most important thing that makes a difference to that developing brain? It's what we call that serve and return interaction, that back and forth with loving, caring older children and adults in their environment. That is the only thing that drives development forward in young children and kids, say, under age 2 or 3. This is really, really important to emphasize and re-emphasize and to message out there because parents are bombarded by messages about put your child in front of this toy. It's good for their development. Give them this video. It'll help them learn. Give them this app. It'll start them on the progress to learning. There's virtually no evidence that any of these things do much at all on their own. It's only when they're done together with the caring adult, which tells you it's the adult that makes the difference. As one of my colleagues once said, there is no app to replace your lap. Somewhere I'm sure you can buy t-shirts that say that. So let's highlight this. Some of you may be familiar with this face-to-face or still-face paradigm that Dr. Ed Tronick created. And let's watch an example of this and see what happens when interactions go well, and then when we make them not go well, and then allow them to go well again.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago. when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
So I worked on this study, actually, or part of the study, as an undergraduate, and watching videos like that was not actually the hard part. It was kind of what we expected. The hard part was when the parent would go into the still face, and the baby didn't seem troubled by that, right? They just didn't seem bothered. Why? Because they weren't used to this back and forth face-to-face interaction, so they didn't feel the loss of it in the same way. Now, I want to be really clear about something here. I don't believe for a moment that any of the parents in our studies, or any parent anywhere on this planet, doesn't care about their children, doesn't love them, doesn't want the best for them, right? That's a universal phenomenon, right, that they do. The thing is that we think of that back and forth as being, oh, it's automatic, it's natural, it's instinctual. Yeah, you know what? It's actually not. It's learned behavior. We learned it somewhere. Okay, so where did we learn it? We learned it by watching other people interact with young children, right? And then trying different things out. But if you're in an environment where you don't see people interacting with young children, then how would you know, right? How would you know what to do? And this leads me to kind of make an important point here that when we're trying to bridge the gap that exists in many ways, we often think the problem is an information gap, right? That if we just tell people that they're supposed to do X, Y, or Z, that's all, right? And people want to do yet another awareness campaign. Yeah, guess what? Families have heard the read, talk, sing, play many, many, many times, right? This is not a surprise to most people. It's not just a matter of an information gap. There's a bigger gap, and that bigger gap is a skills gap. What am I supposed to say to my young child? How do I know? Because they won't talk back to me, right? And so on. That intentional skill building is important. Someone to model and coach and say, yep, you're doing it right, or hey, try this, or things like that. And by the way, there's an even bigger gap, which is a confidence gap, right? There are parents who will say, you're telling me I'm my child's first and best teacher. Sure, but I struggled in school. How in the world am I supposed to do this? I'm not the right person. I'll teach my child the wrong things. Maybe this learning DVD will be better for them, right? It's made by educators, even though the evidence all shows that DVD is not worth anything, right? So as we think about how do we approach families in practice, in programs, in policy, let's not just stop at that information gap, but let's make sure we're actually doing intentional skill building and bolstering confidence through strong trust as well. Okay, so next point. Brain architecture and developing abilities are built from the bottom up. You need simple circuits and skills to do more complex things. Okay, and that's important. As they say, play is the work of infancy, right? That you need to be able to do those simple things in order to do more complex things later on. And kids are not simply playing for amusement. Play is a developmental task of a child in order to be able to do more complicated things as well. All right, now we'll spend a little time talking about toxic stress, which is associated with some persistent neuroendocrine effects. And it does damage the developing brain architecture and lead to some lifelong problems in many ways. This is a head CT scan. These are two head CT scans of 3-year-old children. The child on the left is a typically developing child. The child on the right is one who underwent extreme emotional neglect. Okay, not physical, but emotional. They were fed, they were bathed, they were clothed, but there was very little interaction. This is not an experiment. That would be deeply unethical. This was a child in a large Eastern European orphanage in the 1980s. Not enough attention, not enough staff to be able to interact and engage and talk to them. They were running from kid to kid just to keep up with their physical needs. Without knowing much about how to read a head CT, and this is like you're looking as if there's a cut through the head looking this way, you can see a big difference there. That brain on the right looks shrunken. It doesn't look as dense with neurons. It's physically smaller, it just didn't grow. It's not that the skull kept it from growing. The skull is small because the brain didn't grow. I'm giving you an extreme example because you can see this without much training there. Now, we all have a built-in stress response. It's neurological plus our hormones as well. And that's good for dealing with things like a hungry bear, right, who might be wanting to eat us. It's not so great, however, if we're using it as a way to deal with everyday stresses. Now, not all stresses are bad. Okay, you can think about things like positive stress. Positive stress is good. You feel uncomfortable, you need to figure out how to problem solve, and you gain new skills. This is probably why we give exams and things like that. This is actually necessary in order to build new skills and learn to adapt in different ways. Then there's tolerable stress. These are more serious stressors, but they're temporary and they're buffered by supportive relationships. This is in contrast to toxic stress. People often think, oh, toxic stress is a really, really bad stressor. Well, it might actually be the same thing as tolerable stress, but it's prolonged, it's not temporary. And there's few or no buffering relationships. Okay? That's often what the key is there. So in a young child's life, when they don't have those supportive relationships, this is things like child abuse, parental substance abuse, homelessness. These things interact with the physiology of young children in such a way that we call it toxic stress. So what happens? Those stressors kick off our stress response system. When you're young, you don't have a better stress response system than that hungry bear response, that fight or flight, right? So all you do is you go for that. You pump out these stress hormones. It causes some changes in the brain that we won't have a chance to talk about today. But this is what we see in classrooms. This is what we see in clinics. This is what we see in the justice system. All sorts of places, is this child with a hyper-responsive stress response. They're not as calm. They can't cope as well. And that in turn feeds into more stress in the environment. Right? Think about 2 3-year-old kids on day one of preschool. They're sitting in story circle. Kid number one, everything's fine at home, all good. They start chatting with their friend next to them. Teacher gets a frown on their face. They see that frown and they say, oopsie, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and they pipe right down. Not a big deal. No one's going to even remember that interaction a few minutes later. Kid number two, a lot of violence at home, a lot of yelling, okay? They see that frown, same situation, they see that frown, they don't go, oopsie, they go, uh-oh, someone's going to yell at me. Someone's going to throw things. Someone might hit me, right? Hungry bear, right? And that response goes off and they run screaming down the hall or they go diving or they freeze up. And people say things like, what's wrong with that kid? That's the wrong question. The question should be, what happened to that kid, right? So what happens? You get things like the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, what it tells us. Many of you are probably familiar with this. This is a study of looking at folks who as adults and asking them what happened to them as children. Do remember the people in this study were middle-class folks, mostly white, mostly college educated, in their 50s, split between men and women. People often think that ACEs is about what happens to those living in poverty. Nope, this was not an impoverished at-risk population. Okay? Certainly, rates are even higher in lower socioeconomic status populations, but it's universal across all of the population. These are the different types of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction that they looked at. And you can see these numbers on the right are the prevalence of these in this population. They were surprised. They said, wow, a quarter said they were physically abused at least once as a child. Even the lowest number up there is a lot. That's 1 in 20, which is still quite a few people. And yes, there are things on this list that there are things not on this list that probably should have been on this list. For example, racism and discrimination. Okay, this is the AAP's statement on racism and discrimination. This summarizes all the research showing the negative effects of racism and discrimination on children and youth. This came out pre-murder of George Floyd, by the way. This was a good couple of years before that. Now, you can't measure abuse and say, like, well, this person's abuse was twice as bad as this other person's. It just doesn't work that way. But for each of those categories I mentioned, you can give 1 point for each of those, and that's called an ACE score. And again, a third had none, a quarter had just 1, but 4, 5, or 6, so lots of different types of adverse experiences. Again, 1 in 20 for each of those. I'll show you 2 graphs to show what the outcomes could look like. Here's your risk of developmental delay in the first 3 years of life. If you had an ACE score of 5, 6, or 7, you had 75 to nearly 100% chance of being developmentally delayed, compared to a much lower number if it was just 1 or 2. Right? So pretty big impact there just in the first 3 years. This next slide I'm about to show you is what I saved for my colleagues in adult medicine. This is your ACE score correlated to your risk for adult heart disease. You had 7 or 8, you tripled your risk of adult heart disease. Right? There's nothing else out there that triples your risk. Yet this is quite dramatic, right? So there's all sorts of biological mechanisms that we're not going to spend time on today that explain how this can be possible. But the last point they made in that report was that if we get it right, it's more effective and less costly than trying to fix it later on. Okay, that's pretty key. You don't need to take my word for it. The $4 to $9 in returns for every dollar we invest in early childhood programs has been articulated by none other than James Heckman, who's a Nobel laureate in economics, and he's made this his life's work. Again, it's not that the return on investment is terrible for job training or schooling, it's still positive, but the biggest bang for your bucks is in the early years. And long before we had all this stuff, Frederick Douglass told us it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Okay, so now that I've depressed everyone, what can we do about it? I will give you the solution. Well, no, I'm going to give you some principles of solutions. The report from the AAP that highlighted so much of what I've just shared for you initially in 2012 was landmark, but there was a key issue with it that the authors themselves pointed out. Toxic stress is fundamentally a deficit model, right? What's wrong? What's missing? That sort of thing. And they said we need to actually offer a good solution. It's not that toxic stress is wrong. It defines the problem. It explains how so many of these really wicked problems, right? Disparities in health, education, economic stability, they're rooted in the fact that we all have a shared biology, but very divergent experiences and opportunities, right? Please remember, talent is equally distributed throughout the population, but opportunity is not. And then they gave us the answer, which is relational health. Okay, the health of relationships, individual, family, and community capacities that support development and maintenance of SSNRs that buffer adversity and build resilience. Huh, wait, what's an SSNR? We didn't define that. They said it so many times that they decided that they would turn it into an acronym. SSNRs, not SSRIs, which are Prozac and Zoloft, which have their uses too, is an acronym for safe, stable, and nurturing relationships. Right? They allow kids to feel protected, connected, and competent. Now, this didn't magically just appear 4 years ago, okay? People have been talking about this sort of thing for a long time. Noted social psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner, when asked, what's the most important thing for kids? What does the research say? Somebody's got to be crazy about that kid, right? That's what it boils down to. I want to make a small modification here. Somebody's got to be crazy about that kid and have the ability to show it, right? If you don't have health insurance, if you can't get mental health support, if you're working 2 or 3 jobs to make rent, it's not enough to just be crazy about that kid. We need to provide the circumstances that allow you to show that kid how crazy you are about them, right? So let's not forget that part. All right, remember these two? Often when I show that video, people say or think, oh, that was awful. It was terrible. It must be scarring for that child. Actually, no, not at all. Ed Tronick and his collaborator, Claudia Gold, have actually articulated a concept that they call rupture and repair. That relational ruptures are normal and expected, and if you do the repair work, you actually end up with a better relationship, with better relational health as a result. That this is actually necessary, right? What does a child learn when their parent doesn't respond to them immediately, right? And they get a little upset and all. They learn the stress tolerance. They learn that you can't get everything right when you need it, but you know what? You can put up with this discomfort for a little bit. When they cry when you drop them off at preschool, but you come back every single day to pick them up, they learn that you still love them even when you're not there, right? In fact, they estimate that almost 70% of relational interactions are actually not attuned, right? That they're not in complete synchrony, and that only 30% are. So it's actually normal to have these small ruptures as long as you do the repair work. And this is true not just for parents and children, it's true with just each other, with professionals and their clients, with spouses, with coworkers, all those sorts of things. One thing about resilience, let's be careful about talking about resilience, because there's a lot of conversation about, oh, we need to build resilience and kids need to have grit and determination. Sometimes we don't stop and ask ourselves, why are we talking about a toddler needing resilience and grit and determination instead of focusing on why we can't feed them, right? Like what's wrong with us if we think that resilience is the answer instead of giving them food when they're hungry? So resilience talk, not when it's not accompanied by systems talk, is a problem. It can lead you down some, not useful paths. So I'm all for resilience talk. There's actually many useful things that one can do, but we need to also be talking about the systems challenges that are not being addressed. Okay, so we need solutions that do a number of things. We can build those capabilities at intentional skill building. We can build capacities, right? Keep people from having to work 2 or 3 jobs so they can do the things they want to do. Base things in homes and communities, root causes, long-term effects, prevention, leverage those first 1,000 days. Use evidence to guide you. Notice I didn't say evidence-based. Sometimes the evidence doesn't exist. If you insist on evidence, strict evidence-based, you're going to do the same 12 things over and over. Try different things out. And then finally, what can we do that we can take to scale? Right? This is important because some things have great evidence, but they also cost a ton, right? And we can't scale them necessarily. So we need to think about the scalability piece. Okay, now let's talk about reading, okay? You might have heard this fact that came out of the Risley and Hart study that was done in the 80s and published in the 90s. And this fact that you might have heard is about this 30 million word gap. That is what the study showed. It's not wrong per se, but I want to put it into proper context because we don't talk about this as much anymore, and for good reason. The thing is, it's not just about the number of words. If it was, we would just tell people to mark words with their kids and it just didn't matter. But words are a measurable proxy for something else, which is actually relational health, for connection, for interaction, for things like that. You can have beautiful, deep, meaningful interactions without saying a single word, right? And that wouldn't count, so to speak, under this model. And that's, simply not the case. So I would encourage you, if you hear people talking about word gap, we shouldn't be trying to treat a word gap, but we should be trying to work on supporting good, strong relational health more than anything. So why focus on reading? Because in our society, reading is the fundamental skill for learning. The universe of jobs and careers available to people who can't read is shrinking every single year. Like there's very few jobs left where if you can't read that you can be successful at them. So when a young child is aware of books, notice I didn't say reading, but aware of books, there's a few things that go along with that. One, they learn that printed words actually have meaning. This is this concept of emergent literacy, where that print conveys information. And this is important because the average 2-year-old, even who's been read to, doesn't recognize this. They think that when you read a picture book out loud to them, that you're telling the story just by looking at the pictures. And you use the same words every time. Isn't that interesting? Right? The 3-year-old who's been read to, though, even if they don't know any letters, they're saying, hold on, those little black marks on the page, they're telling me something. They're telling you something, right? And they start to make that connection. When my son was 3 and my daughter was 2, I had them both up on my lap. I was reading a book, a picture book to them. I was reading the left-hand page, and my thumb was over the right-hand side of the page, over the words. My daughter was just listening away. She was 2, but my 3-year-old son reached down and he pushed my thumb out of the way. And I remember thinking, oh, he's developing print awareness. He's staring at these things and saying there's something going on here. Let me give you another example. I might put this up and you might say, this looks like some random scribblings. I don't think it means anything. Or you say, hang on, I think this is some kind of calligraphy. It is. If I clean it up into more standard characters, it's these. And you say, yeah, that's nice, but I may still not know what that means. Okay, so let me decode this for you. This is Middle Kingdom, Zhongguo, or China. Okay, that's how you say China in Chinese. And we've gone from, does this even have meaning, to yes, it's conveying meaning, but you don't know what it is, to, oh, here's the meaning. And now you can connect it to your fund of knowledge about, you know, language or politics or culture or history or food or whatever the case may be. Remember where the wild things are? What was on that last page? So the last few pages of where the wild things are these. And sailed back over a year, and in and out of weeks, and through a day, and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. The last 2 pages are these 2 completely blank white pages with just these 5 words. And when you read it the same way that you read the rest of the book, but no pictures to tell you, it takes that young child and it shoves them in that direction of print awareness. It's masterful, isn't it? We don't know if Maurice Sendak actually intended it. He's dead, so we can't ask him. But yeah, it does that. What else? We use background knowledge and strategies to obtain meaning from print, right? To understand what's going on when we don't necessarily have everything. So, in the Great Green Room, there was a picture of a cow jumping over the, and hopefully in your heads, many of you are saying, moon. Okay. So you knew this because Great Green Room, you know, that you've read this book, Goodnight Moon, 46,000 times to a young child. Or maybe you've never read the book. You don't even know the book exists, but you know that it's a nursery rhyme in Western culture about the cow jumping over the moon. Or you don't know that rhyme at all, and you're looking at the picture and you say, well, there's 2 pictures there, and that one is a cow, and that white curved thing is usually a moon. And you fill it in that way, right? You're extrapolating from context and kind of getting it all together and filling it in there. So again, in where the wild things are, the wild things roared their terrible roars and showed their terrible claws and rolled their terrible eyes, and they did what with their terrible teeth? They gnashed their terrible teeth. Gnashed is an unusual word. If anyone has used the word gnashed in conversation in the last 2 weeks, please speak up in the chat. I doubt it though. My challenge to you all is use the word gnashed in a conversation somewhere in the next couple of weeks to see how it goes. But a young child can say, well, these are all kind of scary things with the body parts. So gnashing must be something scary with the teeth. And that's actually a pretty good working definition, right? So it lets you extrapolate from context and not lose the whole flow of the story, right? And we use these skills our whole lives. And then finally, the more we look at books, the more we become fluent readers, right? We're quickly decoding the text in front of us rather than stumbling over even what does this sound like at all. The other concept that I talk about is dialogic reading, that with young, squirmy toddlers, talk about the book and don't just read out loud what it says. It's not unusual that a parent of, say, a 15-month-old will come in and I'll ask about shared reading, and they'll say, oh, he used to like being read to, but he doesn't like it anymore. Oh, okay. Well, what's going on? Often the parent is simply opening the book and reading the story, and the kid is expected to sit quietly and listen, like you might in second or third grade. Yeah, it doesn't work with a 15-month-old, right? Their attention span is about half a second, and that is normal. It's absolutely normal. Here, pull them up in your lap, let them hold the book, let them turn the pages, talk about the pictures. Where's Max in this picture? Can you show me where Max is? Oh, there he is. What's he in? You're right, it's a boat. What color's the boat? Yes, it's a red boat. That's dialogic reading. I don't care if you never read the story. I'm not going to make you write an essay on it. So once you kind of lay this out and let people know that when you're reading to a young child, like a toddler, but a short attention span in this way, then it helps reading be successful. And as they get a little older, 3, certainly 4, they're more likely to sit and quietly listen to the story more. So reading to kids may not be a natural skill. Let's also keep in mind there's a lot of adults who are functionally not literate. Okay, where I live in Madison in Dane County, it's about 1 million people in the metro kind of county, et cetera, area. We have enough people who are functionally illiterate in the city of Madison alone that would fill our football stadium here at the University of Wisconsin. There's a lot of people that can't read well as adults, and they do everything they can to hide it, and they've gotten pretty good at it. So that we may not be aware of that when we're talking to them, and it can be a multi-generational issue. Reading is hard. There's a lot of brain circuits that are being called together. We actually don't have reading circuits. We have language circuits for spoken language or oral language, but we do not have circuits for reading. We're repurposing other circuits. But as my colleague Perry Class said, when it all happens well, reading is a triumph of the early brain. So what happens when reading happens? More vocabulary and language. We learn to distinguish certain types of words. We start to build a knowledge of narrative, that stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a family activity, right? A parent can teach their child things. The physical closeness of being together builds into routines, sharing stories from your family. And then, of course, there is some letter and early word recognition that happens, and that text actually does convey meaning. And the stories themselves have value, right? About teaching kids about the world and all. The main thing I want to emphasize, though, is that reading should be fun. So I want to say a few things about the Reach Out and Read program, which I've been around for quite a few years. I actually first heard about it when I was working on those face-to-face videos. It was only a 4-year-old program at that point down the hall at Boston City Hospital. Excuse me. And it's now been around for 37 years. So it is not a new program by any means. Reach Out and Read is this concept that we can use the regular checkups, the well visits that so many young children have to talk about shared reading and to support families in being successful in shared reading. If I had to summarize the whole program in a single image, it would be this item here, what I call the prescription for reading. I do actually have these printed and hand them out in clinic. I tell parents that this might be the most important thing that I ever give you for your child, a most important prescription. I'll tell you, I got this a little wrong when I first wrote it. It used to say RX, read books. And then I realized, wait, this isn't just about throwing books at kids, because just giving a kid a book does not actually accomplish anything on its own. It has to be the shared thing, the relational act. So I changed it to share books together, because that's really the key thing. Book giveaway programs on their own have a pretty poor evidence base. Okay. All they do is help those who are already reading together. But if you're not already comfortable doing reading, then it's not going to do a whole lot. You need to be doing the skill building again, not just simply throwing books at families and hoping that they'll be able to make good use of them. Let me show you a sample reach out and read interaction. This is not scripted. You cannot get a toddler to follow a script. Real dad, his own child, real physician. Let's watch what we can learn.
Hello, how are you guys?
Hello.
Oh, you're okay. Can you say okay? I think you're learning a lot. Here's a book for you. Yeah. You might remember that we like to give books out at all of our well visits because we think it's important for kids to love to read. This, that. Yeah, what do you see? Do you like to read?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we just love that the kids get the books early. We hope that you like to read with her. I don't know if there are any times of day that you might spend with her looking at a book or on the weekends.
It's mainly on the weekends that I read to her, but her mother reads to her every night.
Right, right.
Or all the girls.
And she's also with Grandma sometimes too.
Yes, and she reads with her throughout the day.
Great. So Dad, you know, when she was littler, she would put everything in her mouth. You might remember we were talking about that. And now that she's older, she probably won't do it that often. She'll do it a little bit less. But every once in a while, she's still exploring using her mouth and all of her new teeth.
Yes.
And you know, she's still going to test things. You might see that she, you know, is doing so much better using her fingers to open the book. And she'll also be asking you to read the book. And where before she might just look at it, if she likes the book that you have or she's interested in something in it, like a cat or an animal that she sees, she might be sort of getting your attention by hitting the book. But she's just really doing great with loving that book.
Yes. It's difficult where I don't read to the girls as much as the mother. I'm working, but I know she does use that as the calming tool just before bed. You know, that's reading 2-3 books. Each one of the girls pick out a book, and then we'll read them all. Sometimes I stay in the bed for the story too. So we all get in the same bed, we listen to the story, then we put them to bed. But it's definitely a calming tool that we use.
Yeah, but we love that because they're learning from you how wonderful it is to be together, to be together as a family, or even just you and Nyla, and reading the books together is a really nice activity. It's different from everything else that you might do to be with them. Nyla, do you want to read the book? Yeah, show Daddy the book. You're tricky. Yeah,
Look,
go ahead.
Nana. Hello, little mouse. What are you doing? You see the mouse? That's the mouse. Oh, I see. Are you going to pick that red, ripe strawberry? The big hungry bear can smell a red, ripe strawberry a mile away. You don't like this book? Huh?
No, actually, she does like this book. She's exploring it more. She's doing what I would expect a 1-year-old to do. If she was 2 or 3, she might be a little bit more interested in the next step of the story, the next part of what you're telling her. You're going to notice that she's going to start pointing to things and that you can point to things. The kids are really, really in the phase now where they're learning a lot of words. This is the age. She's been listening to you all along, but now she's starting to say a few words. So the more you can point to things and say the words and encourage her to do that, the better.
All right. There was so much there, right? One, there was all the are people talking around this child? Yes, right? She's just babbling away. You know she has the building blocks of so much more language to come. Are they singing around her and rhyming around her? Yeah, we could hear some of that cadence in there as well. Dad is doing a great job, right? He's just slaying it. You know, he had the book out there. When he cleared his voice, cleared his throat and said, you know, hey, Nai, right? She looked up at him to check in. She knew what was coming. And then they both looked down. In developmental psychology, looking at that book together, we call it joint attention. He did dialogic reading, right? He said, you see the mouse? That's the mouse. That's not in the text, right? That's dialogic reading. We learned about who's at home, mom, dad, grandma, some number of siblings. Dad works a lot, but when he's home, they all get into bed and they all look at books together. This is a family that has strong relational health. She's manipulating the book. She's fine motor skills. She lit up when the book came out. She knew what that was. So you know she's being read to. There was so much there, and that entire video was a mere 3 minutes. That's a really good use of my 3 minutes in pediatrics, watching a family do that, because I learned so much about them that I just described to you there, right? So it's not only good for families, it not only does skill building and reinforcement and all that, and encourages all this other stuff, it's also good for us on the healthcare practitioner side. Please remember, we're not trying to teach a kid to read early. It's about learning to love books, like this adorable child here. That's my daughter, who is now almost 23, um, and all. So, I want to just make a couple of other points here. One, uh, if you're not sick of listening to me after today, we do have a podcast called the Reach Out and Read Podcast. We are actually getting close to the beginning of our seventh season, believe it or not. We won 2 national awards, hundreds of episodes just talking about books, reading, parenting, you name it. It's aimed at a general audience. Please subscribe, rate, review, and give us 5 stars. So just a little ad there. And also for any of you that might be in or around early care and education, there's another podcast that we currently have on pause, but will be coming back, called Teachers, Toddlers, and Tissues, which is about health and well-being in early childhood settings. I co-host it with Rachel Giannini from Chicago, a well-known preschool teacher. And we are on pause because of some funding hiccups, but we're coming back soon. Our funding has been restored. All right, so in the last few minutes here, we know that families need support, and we know that one of the key ways we can support them is around good relational health. And relational health does make a lot of, has a lot of potential in it to make a big difference. And I would argue that shared reading is one of those key scaffolds for allowing good relational health to occur. So I want to close with 2 quotes and 2 pictures, okay? So one, I hope that today I've not only shown you the world that is, right, which has a lot of challenges for families, for young children, for everyone, but that also there's a world that we can dream about that isn't that hard to achieve if we are willing to invest in it, right? So that, yeah, there's problems, but there's also solutions. And we can do that together. We can do it through shared reading. We can do it through strong relational health, and we can do it through good systems change. Second quote I want to share with you is from the Sutton Trust, which is actually based in the UK, but it applies so well here, that if you wait for school, it's too late, right? That there's a pattern of ever increasing inequality during school years and beyond. And if we want to get this right, we need a good strategy to nurture the fledgling talent in young children, so often lost before it has had a chance to flourish. And then the 2 pictures I want to show you. One, so my colleague Perry Klaus, who I mentioned, collects images, not the originals, she's not wealthy, of Renaissance art, showing reading Madonnas, okay? Because this is one of the few times in at least Western art that you see parents and children looking at books together. So she's just fascinated by these representations. This is in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. This is one I had the privilege of seeing, and that she didn't have in her list, so I was pleased to share it with her. Di Tito, first of all, knows how to draw a human child and a mother, and you can see how well he's done this, right? You see how the child is bearing weight with a little support, right, from mom there. You can see the child pointing. You can see how relational and interactional this moment is. You can almost imagine that mom is going to say next, yes, that's an apple, or something like that. Di Tito thought this was such a beautiful moment of parent-child interaction that not only did he choose to lay this out in a beautiful piece of artwork, he chose to assign it to the mother-child pair that in his time, in his society, in his world, was the most important, right? And to put those 2 things together. And it says those are saints off to the side. I think they are actually probably like, home visitors or social workers, but that's okay. We'll let them be called saints. They are. And then the last image I'll close with here is a photo I took years ago, which is of my wife reading to my son. I caught them years ago, lost in a book together. And it reminds me that children are made readers in the laps of their parents. So I always try to close with that. That URL on the top, the Linktree link, will take you to podcasts, websites, blah, 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 all the things, as well as my email address. If you have questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I just want to thank you all for the parts you play in the lives of young children, whether they're your own or anyone else's, professionally or personally, and for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nafsaria. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Amazing. Thank you for sharing your medical expertise and passion for early childhood literacy and health. Even as our conference is focused on early childhood communities and our audience is from the early childhood sector, your keynote is an important reminder for us on the significance of early childhood development. Your connection of policies and systems to early childhood health is deeply affirming and encouraging of our work in advancing community systems change. And I know our audience enjoyed learning about reach out and read, and how providers can find innovative ways to build systems of care. One last round of applause for Dr. Nafsaria. Thank you. Okay. And now our next guest will help us bring the conference to a close with poetry to align our hearts, minds, and bodies on centering community well-being. Please welcome Atena O. Danner to the stage. I'll do a quick introduction and then the floor is yours, Atena. Atena O. Danner is a cultural worker who imagines Black liberation, engaged in boundless curiosity. She holds degrees from the School of the Art Institute and Erickson Institute, which I know we have a lot of Erickson Institute in the house. I'll represent of you here. As a poet, singer, and visual artist, Atena's work encompasses kitchen table specificity and folk story relatability, covering topics including neurodiversity, human connection, and collective liberation. Her book of poetry, Incantations for Rest, Poems, Meditations, and Other Magic, was awarded a Nautilus Silver Award for Poetry in 2023. Atena is also a facilitator, speaker, and organizer, working to incorporate struggles for justice into her life as a caregiver in a family of complex needs. She has a letter to parents published in the anthology Read This When Things Fall Apart, Letters to Activists in Crisis, released in 2025. In their home north of Chicago, on land stolen from the people of the Peoria, Menominee, Ho-Chunk Nations, and the Council of Three Fires, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi, Atena lives with her partner, pets, and 2 sons. Atena, welcome.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me okay?
I hear you, yes.
Okay, great. I was like, oh no. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again to the Action for Children team for this wonderful opportunity to bridge my life as a creative cultural worker with my 20+ year early childhood education and advocacy career. I am extremely grateful to have been here to hear Dr. Navsaria's excellent talk. Hit all the notes that I like, and that also bridges more of my career interests, which are brain science, early childhood neurodevelopment, and early literacy. So this is really a great day for me. And shout out, of course, to my Erickson family, a few who I see in the chat. I know you're all out there. And also thank you to the interpreters. Thank you for bringing all of our words across the different languages. I have 2 poems for you today, both related to my experiences in organizing and activism in Chicago. The first one is called Reckon, Reclaim. And actually, I realized as Dr. Nafsaria was talking that the title is definitely influenced by the concept of rupture and repair, which is one of my favorite ideas to talk about in the world of early childhood development. But this poem was written for a community grieving event that a group of Chicago organizers put together to commemorate the first 100,000 recorded COVID deaths during the pandemic lockdown. The collective grief is a really important response to collective loss and trauma, so that we can make our way towards healing eventually. We're still working on that. That poem can be found in my poetry collection, Incantations for Rest. And so there we go. And the second poem is called Relating to the Origin. And that was written to celebrate the publication of a book called Let This Radicalize You, which is co-written by my friend Kelly Hayes. And the poem itself can actually now be found in an anthology, also published by Kelly, who is the editor, called Read This When Things Fall Apart. So I will start with Reckon, Reclaim. When you say you know the relationship isn't perfect, it's code for all the red flags dotting your lawn, telling you where not to dig. How long have we been grieving the truth? When you fear the end of your weekend, even as it just begins, and in the last hours pretend not to know, that you do not know how you will survive going back, reaching into yourself to give your warm will over again. How long have we been grieving our freedom? When you reconnect with an old friend who reminds you of what could have been, who knows who you used to be and could be again, so your whole self pulls toward that feeling like a magnet, dizzy with the force of worth. How long have we been grieving our safety? The slithering haze of capitalism is thick and invisible, pushing into your lungs. You can taste its saccharine notes in the back of your throat every time you breathe. How long have we been choking and heaving? So busy coughing, we forgot that we're still breathing. We forget we are still here. It's time to admit that we've known it's been so bad for so long, lifetimes, before these 14, 15, 18 months, these 4 years, 8 years, and on and on. How long have we been bereft and mourning, grieving our star-filled skies, our gardens, our homes, our sleep, our laughter, our people? Our right to create sanctuary is as fundamental as our heartbeats and dreaming, as necessary as skin touching skin. This season of reap and reckon, with enough hot screams and tears to fill the cold sky with clouds, has also ushered in the clearing of air that necessarily follows the storm. A taste of clean rain, a glimpse of blue sky, a whiff of rich earth, a touch of warm comfort after days and days and days. Remember what we were told to learn to live without. Remember all we were told we should throw away. Bless the dirt-streaked rebellion of tending our gardens. May we always choose to feed ourselves and each other. Power to the sleepers, faithfully napping, healing, and restoring. Rest is wealth that we must reclaim and redistribute. Look to the wise, disabled, divergent, and distant who mapped the smooth, blank spaces, who find water in places that many write off as wasteland. They covered our medicine with trash. Let's take it back. Let's choose a world we can heal in, choose air and water and earth again and again, choose laughter and care and warm skin. If we learn to protect our collectiveness, it can carry the weight of our grief like nothing else can. Let's be wolves who walked back through the veil, electrified, hungry, and ready to fight. That is Reckon Reclaim. And now this is relating to the origin. And relating to the origin is one of the definitions for the word radical. I know this song. I belong here. Let me tell you how I got here. Movement was my government cheese, my block on Damon Street in Flint, Michigan at sunset. Activism was my immunization, my after-school program, my family, which is to say, I was a child. Didn't know why I was there or what was important or how much it really meant to me. It simply was. Mike Brown was the straw that broke my back. So many terrors, before and since, but trauma is a time machine. Wounds are checkpoints across our timelines. I am scrolling on social media, unable to stop. I am trapped, horror-struck, between the lenses of endlessly streaming eyes. I am running down State Street toward the gathering crowd, surprising myself with a guttural howl. I am working 2 jobs, working 3 jobs, trying to show up when I can show up, drinking rocket fuel, eating lightning so I can show the fuck up. It was the babies and the Smalls and the comrades who gathered me out of my scattershot attempts to make a difference, who pulled me on to the collective path. I was born again, wailing at the chaos of new life, a child among wiser children, stumbling, eager through lessons, tripping over my unlearning, stepping hesitantly on shaking legs, nearly paralyzed with the urgency of things, unprepared but ready, halting but forward. I know this song. Bucket drumbeat, orange lights, I am lying on the ground, singing. Smell of asphalt, sweat, we are arms linked in the throng, singing. Icy wind and watering eyes, we are marching in the street, singing. Halyard cord striking through the silence. I am laid open before the crowd, singing, come, oh, come. We belong together. We are strong together. I am dancing into traffic, leaning into faith. I know this song. I remember that night. I found myself singing along, a song of longing and knowing. Some of us were so focused on the sun, we failed to see the moonlight. Some of us were so focused on the moon, we missed the cartography of the stars. Some of us were so busy looking up that we had to learn to look to each other. Some of us have been so focused on looking that we will need to learn listening again. Learn touching and feeling again, learn smelling and tasting and seeking again. Drive your hands as deep as you can into the dirt. You will know it when you feel it, when you find it. Don't tell me what is not possible. My time and your breath are better spent blowing parachutes of dandelion fluff, investing in bright Black futures dotting the landscape. I belong here. We belong here. Wake into this, our story. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still we'll remain, singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears through all the years, singing. Thank you all so much. Thank you again to Illinois Action for Children. Thank you to Dr. Navsaria. Thank you all for your kind attention. I really appreciate being here with you.
Atena O Danner, everyone, a round of applause, please. Thank you so much for that gift of magic. I felt it in my soul, and just beautiful. Thank you so much. And as you can see from the reactions in the chat, I was not the only one. Thank you. As we close out, we want to return to our acknowledgement from the opening. When we began, we named the weight all of us can carry: traumas, unmet needs, and the violence of systems that harm our communities. Yet during these past 3 days, we've chosen community care not as an ideal, but a practice of reimagining systems together. As we close, let's honor how we've turned toward each other and carry these new learnings and connections forward. Let's revisit the call and response we did on Tuesday. Once again, I'll say the first line, and I encourage you to join in saying the second line out loud to yourself. Folks are muted, but the action of speaking this out loud is powerful. Right, so when I say the font in black, you all say the font in purple. We are rooted in care. Our liberation is bound together. Let these words resonate in your body as we continue. With this grounding, we ask you to reflect on what it means to center community well-being in your work and to be in just and reciprocal relationships with the land, families, and the systems we are working to transform.